is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Dwight York demands excellence from Soca Warriors. RBC named Best Private Bank despite Forex challenges. David Rudder's son wins prestigious Rhodes Scholarship. And internationally, Trump names Linda McMahon and Mehmet Oz for key cabinet roles. Now for the details. Head coach of the Trinidad and Tobago men's national football team, Dwight York, is pushing his players to raise their game as the squad prepares for the next round of the World Cup qualifiers in 2025. During training at the Larry Gomes Stadium, York focused on sharp shooting and movement, urging strikers to control the ball and place their shots with precision. York's influence has impressed players like veteran Kevin Molino, who praised the coach's intensity and fresh approach. Meanwhile, the team won a friendly match against Defence Force 1-0 on Saturday with a goal from Kahim Thomas. York is also advocating for changes to immigration laws to expand the player pool by allowing foreign-based athletes with Trinidadian roots to represent the national team. Talks on these amendments are ongoing. The Royal Bank of Canada has been named the best private bank in Trinidad and Tobago by Global Finance magazine. RBC's head of personal and private banking, Simone Edwards, described the recognition as a testament to the bank's commitment to client service and tailored financial solutions. However, the bank continues to face foreign exchange challenges. Starting December 1st, RBC will reduce credit card forex limits by 66% due to currency supply constraints. The bank says local TNT dollar transactions remain unaffected. Canadian-born Noah Rudder, son of Trinidadian Calypso legend David Rudder, has been awarded the 2025 Rhodes Scholarship, the world's oldest and most esteemed graduate fellowship. The 21-year-old, currently pursuing a double major in peace, conflict and justice and drama at the University of Toronto, plans to study public policy and fine arts at Oxford University. Noah expressed excitement and gratitude for the opportunity, citing his passion for addressing social issues and his dedication to the arts. David Rudder shared his pride in his son's achievement, noting his hard work and natural talent. Noah has also excelled in research, leadership, and acting, with performances at the Toronto Fringe Festival and other productions. He will begin his Oxford studies in October 2025. Internationally, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has tapped Linda McMahon, former WWE CEO and ally, as his nominee for Education Secretary. McMahon, who previously served as head of the Small Business Administration, is expected to advance Trump's agenda of shifting education control to states and dismantling the Department of Education. Trump also nominated Dr. Mehmet Oz to lead the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. A celebrity doctor known for controversial health advice, Oz will oversee programs serving over 150 million Americans. Both picks must be confirmed by the Senate in 2025. McMahon's nomination follows her recent involvement in a lawsuit against WWE, which she denies, while Oz has faced scrutiny for promoting unproven medical treatments. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Out to work, seems as though the potential slow down some businessmen, and I will admit I myself was afraid of being the follow-up, I guess you could say, might not be that bad. The effect might not be as severe. We're coming to the Christmas season, And our economy tends to be unbalanced based on what sector of the economy you're in. Of course, if it's retail, significant importance is based on Christmas. If you're with events, significant importance is placed on Carnival. With regards to tourism, depending if you're in Tobago, the August month is one of the most important months of the year, more so than Christmas and, of course, beginning of year Carnival, or even Tobago's own Carnival, which is only a weekend. So for each sector, you need to hit certain sales numbers, revenue numbers, because it will affect the rest of your year. If you don't have a good Christmas, you might be struggling throughout the rest of next year for retailers and wholesalers and the like. So this was an important situation for the country and for the country's economy, despite the fact that it seems as though, given the cost of living and the reduced availability of foreign exchange, consumers and businessmen took to using their credit card more and more. And the banks, at the end of the day, just because you use your credit card doesn't increase the available amount of foreign exchange, so they had to cut back the limits. And this has been a case of reducing limits over time, but we are where we are. The thing is, all that said, I understand where the port workers are coming from. It is said that the port workers are discouraged and demotivated because, to some extent, what else are they going to do if they feel that their concerns are basically being ignored by management? So when you're in negotiations and the other side is stonewalling you, what do? You need to find a way to get leverage to stop them from stonewalling you and to listen to you and to give you some concessions. Now, I'm not here to debate if the union is asking for something reasonable or unreasonable. But what I am going to say is, again, I understand the situation they're in. Let's just assume that what the union is asking for is reasonable. Let's just assume that. It's a rock and a hard place, because what are they going to do when the court says you can't strike? And the court, it's not to say that the court doesn't have good reason. But the fact of the matter is, now this is the overall situation that the members of the union find themselves in. Now, what usually should happen in the case of a free economy is, my working conditions are poor and my boss is not listening to me. Therefore, I get a new job. Now, given the state of the economy, that is not necessarily going to be easy. And ironically, this is one of the reasons why I disagree with some of the tactics of unions, because they will, in some cases, not all, go so far as to admit that perhaps the workers of an entity is bloated, that there are too many workers. That are, and obviously, if some workers are redundant, it's not as though we're getting productivity out of all of them. But they're not going to do anything to reduce the membership or to agree to reduce the membership. And in a case like that, ironically, it works against them. They think it works for them because the more members, the more dues, the more dues, the more money they get. The more money they get, the more money they get. It all comes back down to money, it seems, with regards to wage and union negotiations. But the fact of the matter is, if an organization is looking at its worker base being bloated, and you're saying we don't want anybody to leave, we don't want to reduce our membership, then the entity has no fear of workers leaving, even if there were jobs available elsewhere, because you're fighting so hard to keep all of your members there. And to some extent, I can't blame the Port of Port of Spain if this is indirectly their intention. We have too many workers. They don't want to leave. Well, we can't entertain their demands until this situation gets rebalanced. But let's just take all of that aside now. And let's just go with the bare basics of the situation. The union is saying that we have issues, and it seems as though their issues are not being addressed. And what little leverage they had, well, to be fair, it wasn't little, but what leverage they had, hey, this is an important time for the port to operate. And we kind of do a song and dance of, we will strike, and then we'll clear the backlog, and then we'll strike, and then we'll clear the backlog, and we'll get some leverage on our side, and we're not totally paralyzing the port. And the court said, nope, this is not working. And now it seems as though, based on the reporting, because I believe all 3 daily newspapers have a story on this, they don't know what else to do. Well, I know what else to do. If you're not willing to find another job, and again, I acknowledge the fact that it's not so simple right now based on the current conditions of the economy. If that is not available to you, if that is not an option, then you need to, in this case, you have the opportunity to deal with management indirectly. Because the overall situation, if the court does not have room to help you reasonably, well, then that's government to modify legislation to something more reasonable, whatever that may look like. In the case of the Port of Spain, to potentially, maybe government should be looking at management and management's objectives and needs to provide some oversight so that the management of the port could be more reasonable, assuming, for the sake of the example, not what is actually happening, but the example of the discussion right now, assuming that management is unreasonable. Or maybe there were directives from the political leadership to the port management who have their hands tied. Well, the long and short, what I'm getting at is we need better leadership. Here's the thing. If you're a diehard UNC or a diehard PNM, your party will take you for granted. They will. It is an age-old lesson of human psychology. If one side knows that you will always support him, that's how you get spoiled children. That's how you get corrupt leaders. It's not that different. Good children have parents who eventually will not always take their side, will not always support them, will be willing to punish them, will be willing to take away privileges, will be willing to take away their possessions if necessary on a temporary basis or permanent, depending on how bad they misbehave, in order to teach them consequences. But if you want to be diehard for any political party, what you're saying to that political party is, I will never, ever impart or demand consequences on top of you. Ever. Because when I say things like, look, maybe we need a change in government, it's not because I want to see the PNM kicked out and never to return. But rather, once we start to introduce more and more consequences for poor leadership and governance, first of all, the PNM, being the incumbent, should get the message they need to buck up. But then indirectly, the UNC, being the other party in waiting, should also get the message that they need to buck up. And depending on how the election goes, right now our situation is so bad, we probably do need a change in government in the next election. That doesn't mean a long term we need to shackle the PNM and throw them in the dungeon never to return. But as a two-time incumbent, they need to see some consequences, as well as a willingness to tell whoever takes their place, don't make the same mistake. Because it's not about hating the PNM. It's about a lack of results. And it should be sending consequences to ultimately send the message, we're not voting people out on a timetable. We are looking for someone to step up and to take situations like this that the port workers find themselves in, between a rock and a hard place, and to figure it out so that their standard of living will not be unreasonable. Their working conditions will not be unreasonable. Again, this is assuming that their demands are reasonable. I reserve the right to give actual analysis on the topic if more details come out as to what's going on. But this is not a unique example that is an exception to the norm. In too many cases, we have situations where, as the president of the Nurses Association said, at least I think I would assume he's referring to those who do the job well and who put in the work and the effort, are being held hostage by management, being held hostage by those co-workers who are lazy and are not doing the job and don't care about the job, they're being held hostage. What are they going to do? They're going to leave because some of these workers, at least in the health sector, the public health system, it's a calling to them. They see the patients and they see the fact that, look, if we don't do the job, what's going to happen to our patients? There are probably some port workers, some clerks, some public administrators, some ministry workers who understand that if we were to leave, we're propping up the system. If too many of us, the actual people who do the work, leave, the system will collapse. So we're being held hostage. The workers, through union negotiations, cannot fix these things. But the society can demand better performance. And it doesn't even have to necessarily mean that the current administration is voted out. It might have to happen. The long and short is not just voting out for voting out's sake. It's about properly communicating as a society what our expectations are and having higher expectations. Case in point, the Minister of National Security is saying that crime is like COVID-19. And the point is he's saying everybody needs to do their part. And in general, out of context, I agree with that message. Everybody does have to do their part. But let's be real for a second. We could look at all the long-term solutions to crime that we want. We could improve the education system. We could improve community programs. We could improve witness protection, community engagement. We could improve after-school activities, etc., etc., etc. All of those things are necessary and need to be looked at. But none of those things are going to take the guns out of young men's hands today or tomorrow. It will prevent children from growing up, hopefully, some of them, from growing up and becoming gang members. And we've already seen some young men die because of making those decisions, because the system is broken, and we need to fix it. Not for tomorrow. We need to fix it for tomorrow, yes, but we also need to fix it for today, because there's violence today. And at the end of the day, you just need to look not at the American election who became president. You need to look deeper than that, because the American president is indirectly responsible for local crime. In TNT, crime in capital is a national issue, because crime anywhere is a national issue. But in a country as big as that, crime in a city is a local issue. They have their own leadership that is directly responsible. And in a lot of cases, multiple jurisdictions try to do things like crime prevention programs, and we defund the police because the police are too harsh, and prosecuting crime was I don't want to go into it because I don't want to open the doors to a whole set of debates and then have, and we don't have time for that. But the point is, at least in the city of Oakland, that saw crime at record lows until they defunded the police and brought out a whole set of crime prevention programs and safety officers because police were bad. And what happened? Crime skyrocketed. Crime skyrocketed, and I believe the mayor of Oakland, I think it is, and the district attorney of that city were voted out in these elections. The mayor had 2 terms, I believe, voted out, because the people eventually realized if you literally just look at the news, the same news anchors that were reporting on the rising levels of crime reported on the record lows 2 years ago or 4 years ago, before COVID. This is not due to COVID. So at some point, we need the police to actually police, first and foremost. And I'm not saying that the performance of the police is, if it's bad, you immediately get rid of the government. Again, the point is not to get rid of an administration. The point is to demand better. If the administration hears the message, if the society effectively conveys the message, and they continue doing whatever it is they're doing, now we could debate if the message has been sent or not. But ideally, the first step is we need to see better from the police. Therefore, we need to see better from police leadership. And it could go all the way down as it needs be. And if they're not responding, as you go up the line, eventually it goes past the commissioner, and then it goes a step further. And then society needs to start saying, hey, something needs to happen on the cabinet level. I say cabinet level because in the past I would say, hey, don't blame the Minister of Education for everything to do with education, because I'm sure the budget allocation is not her decision, among other things. And I've said that for multiple ministers, because cabinet will make certain decisions as a whole because it reflects on the administration. So this national security thing, it's not just Fitzgerald Hines' fault. He's the guy filling the seat because probably no one else wants to sit in that chair. There's a whole National Security Council and a whole cabinet and a whole Ministry of Finance that controls the budget. These things are more complicated than just one man. If you, the people, think that means we need to vote them out, then vote them out. Because we can't, it's like with Erla. Everybody wanted to give her a chance. Let's give her a chance. Let's give her a chance. This is not the job where you give people a chance, right? This is not, oh, I'm going to give the local neighborhood ice cream man a chance. The consequences of failure at the level of police commissioner all the way up to the cabinet and the seat of the prime minister can have negative consequences that reverberates through decades. Because to some extent, that's some of the arguments of some of my callers. Right? So at some point, I can't blame the politicians because they are responding to what we say, do, our messaging, our communication to them, indirectly or directly. They get away with whatever we tolerate. Society are the parents that seem unwilling to parent the politicians who are essentially their children. So they're spoiled. And to some extent, you don't blame the child for being spoiled. You blame the parents. They're supposed to listen to us. They are selected by us. It's not even to say children that are forced upon you. They are children of your own choosing. You adopt all of them. And yet you still fail them. And yes, there might be some who are so bad, it doesn't matter what you do, they will always be bad. Then we need to be willing to get rid of them too. Because it's not just about you and me. If you want to suffer under the current circumstances, that's fine, but why should you insist that the rest of us have to suffer in the current circumstances? And the current circumstances includes two parties, because there are two parties in Parliament. Don't get it twisted. All right. I'll get into one topic before we welcome our guest this morning. Not going to take a break. Let's go straight in today's daily review. Okay, this is probably a good segue into the first topic. This is a big topic from since yesterday, and it has grown. It has grown. Didn't speak about it yesterday. Will probably have to speak about it again tomorrow, because the degree of which it's grown, I think, is a bit crazy. But anyway, there are two cases. One yesterday, reported yesterday, one reported today, where police officers with major accusations against them essentially were cut loose by the court. In the first case, because the actual prosecutor did not show up, and the police representative that did show up, or the prosecutorial representative that did show up, was not the one who was supposed to show up, did not have the case files, was not prepared to continue with the case, and thus, I believe the master of the court in this case had to throw it out. 7 police officers. This is with regards to that San Grande incident, which I believe was caught on video. So it's a high-profile, high-public situation. Right? One of the newspaper reports said the recording ignited widespread claims of police corruption targeting businessmen in the area of San Grande. Right? This case was led by the leading officer was a current deputy commissioner of police, who was then leading the Professional Standards Bureau, Susan Martin. How does this case collapse to this degree? Prosecution failed to meet crucial disclosure deadlines on 2 separate occasions. 2 separate occasions. The stand-in prosecutor admitted to having no case files or updates. How does this happen? Tell me, Commissioner of Police, if you're serious about crime, how does this happen? How? Exactly what? And maybe this is the argument why the police should not be policing themselves, because they already seem to be incapable of policing the rest of us. Why? in heaven's name do we think they have the capacity to police themselves? How? So, of course, the opposition has come out to speak out against the situation. Just running through it quick. Both Dinesh Rambali and Dr. Rudal Munila have spoken about this. Dinesh Rambali says the outcome is a national embarrassment. I can't fault him for that. I cannot fault him for saying that. When cases like this fall apart because of delays and inaction, it sends a dangerous message that justice is unattainable and impunity reigns supreme. This is not an isolated incident. It's part of a larger crisis in law enforcement and the judiciary. Erodes the public trust, he went on to say. Dr. Munira said the commissioner must address whether disciplinary charges will be brought against the officers if no action is taken. It sends a clear signal that corruption and incompetence are tolerated. And Minister in the Ministry of National Security for the police, that's his responsibility apparently. There needs to be proper closure on the case of the 7 police officers. I agree with that. Here's the problem. How are you going to get there? How are you going to get there? Right? But then it goes on. Minister of Finance, because he was at the same function where the minister in the Ministry of National Security was at. Apparently he is shocked at the situation. I want to get his words. He was shocked at the situation because of the reason behind it. Right? He said, I'm not throwing a dig at you, Madam Commissioner, but when I read that story about the case being thrown out because nobody showed up or they didn't present a proper defense or a proper prosecution, I was quite shocked. In fact, there's another story. I have no argument in principle. Perhaps when, and I'll get into this tomorrow, when Keith Scotland was saying maybe security officers could fill out some functions of police officers, the minister said, I have no arguments in principle to that. Perhaps, Madam Commissioner, that will allow police officers to show up in court. Apparently, it raised some audible gasps by the audience and attendants. The police commissioner had to sit there and smile. I do wonder, is this a turning point of the current administration, understanding that their law enforcement situation seems to be more and more untenable? And this being essentially an election year, because the election, I believe, is less than a year away. It's within a year away. But that's not all. That's not all. Because again, we have one case, and but a day later, granted, it's only 2 cases. Statistically, 2 cases is not the same as a trend. You need more than 2 data points to be a trend. But optically, looks bad, can't help but point that out, because I assume a lot of people who put 2 and 2 together will say, hey, this thing looks bad. There was another case where 5 more officers accused of accepting a $30,000 bribe and 5 pounds of marijuana. They were discharged by a master of the High Court due to insufficient evidence. This is the thing. At the sufficiency hearing, it was found that the case against the 5 was marred by prosecutorial missteps, and repeated non-compliance with court orders. Now, might not be a trend, but starting to be a pattern, at least in 2 cases, non-compliance of court orders, despite earlier leniency shown by, I believe, Master Sarah De Silva, who allowed the state time to correct its procedural errors. Not that the case was weak or that a jury found the accused innocent. No. Procedural. One would think that things like procedural errors would not be so common as to have 12 police officers accused of something serious to essentially get off on a technicality. And to be fair, let's go back to Dinesh Rambali. He's pointed out something that's very unfortunate. And it's the fact that at the end of the day, these cops will never get to clear their name. Because that's the benefit of a trial. They might feel happy that they've gotten away with it, right? Or they've gotten free. I suspect those that are innocent to some extent at least, would have potentially wished that they got cleared of charges, not that the charges were thrown out because of prosecutorial missteps. They will never get their day in court, so there will always potentially be a cloud of suspicion over them. So this is, in my opinion, on principle, not a good outcome for anybody involved, but it is what it is. I'll get more into this probably tomorrow. I'm out of time, so let's take a break. When we come back, we will switch gears and welcome our guests this morning. Stay tuned. This is Talking About on WESN. Sean Michael Small here. We'll be right back after this.
Give us a call.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
This holiday season, bring the magic of Christmas home with WESN's Joy of Christmas. Relive timeless classics from the laughter to the heartwarming moments that make the season unforgettable.
Hey, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
Santa's coming to town. Oh my God!
Oh, baby.
Experience the joy of WESN special productions, crafted to bring you new stories and cherished memories. This year, let WESN bring the joy of Christmas to your home.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
Catch the spirit, catch the joy.
Anchors away. May the force be with you.
Only on WESN, your content capital.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
All right, Sean Michael Small here. This is Talking Points. We're going to get our guest. We're going to welcome her shortly. But in the meantime, I have a little bit more time to speak potentially on this topic. It's very disappointing, to say the least. And now it seems as though it has gone so far that the Minister of Finance has taken a subtle jab at the Commissioner of Police. An interesting development. It begs the question, is this any sort of indicator? Is this a little bit of something maybe sticking out behind the curtain, the veil of secrecy that usually politicians prefer to operate under? Maybe this is something, this is a subtle message, a subtle hint, not just the commissioner, but to the public, because it was said in a public forum. Minister of Finance calling out the Commissioner of Police. But the thing about it is, this issue, it's one thing to have bad apples in the police service. It's another thing to have issues prosecuting bad apples in the police service. It's another thing to switch gears slightly to have to deal with issues about crime fighting and poor results in crime fighting. But when you actually go so far as to have suspects and potential evidence, and it falls apart because of prosecutorial missteps, or in the case of the Moruga triple murder, it falls apart because one of the witnesses, at the very least, contributes to that case falling apart with an inconsistent testimony that is of questionable intentions, to say the least. And I'll leave it up to you to decide what questions you want to ask about her intentions. How does this happen? How is it that police fail to follow proper procedures so that criminal matters in the courts could proceed as they are supposed to? And to what extent does it seemingly happen more in cases involving police than in cases not involving the police? That's an interesting question. And maybe some media house will do the legwork for me. I have no shame in admitting it in this case, right? But that's an interesting question. I'm not entirely too sure where to find that. Probably have to go through court records or whatever, compile information. But how often does this happen? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the criminal justice system, this is a common occurrence across the board, in which case that might even be a worse sign than if it was just a bias with regards to the police, one way or the other. All right, so let's end here. We have our guest this morning to continue the conversation because I think we may not fully appreciate how difficult this Forex situation is. But joining me, of course, we have specialist consultant, Dr. Indira Sajiwan, of course, an economist extraordinaire in our own TNT. Dr. Sajiwan, good morning.
A very good morning to you and a good morning to all your viewers, listeners.
So, Dr. Sajiwan, of course, you are one of the, one of the analysts, one of the opinion leaders, one of the economists that the media has turned to in times like this. It seems as though our Forex situation, it was never that great with regards to the last couple of years, and now there are signs that potentially it's getting worse. How concerned are you overall with the current state of things and seemingly the time frame by which it's either maybe getting worse or we're not necessarily seeing solutions? Like, how bad do you think our position is?
Well, I think our situation is pretty bad, and I am very, very concerned about it. I'm concerned about it mostly because the conversation continues to surround the issue of curbing demand, which, yes, in the shorter term you must do, but we are concentrating heavily on how we can curb demand, how we can distribute the scarce foreign exchange supply that we have, and we're not hearing anything about how do we increase the supply of foreign exchange in the shortest possible time. You see, foreign exchange is like a commodity, and it is influenced by the laws of demand and supply. If demand is higher than supply, price is going to go up. If supply is greater than demand, price is going to fall. It is the natural order of things. So that if we didn't have the kind of shortage that we have in, for example, the black market rate for foreign exchange wouldn't exist, because it would mean that we could all go into the bank and request and receive however much foreign exchange that we want. But that is not the case in Trinidad and Tobago, and it has not been so for a very long time, actually. In fact, it has not been so for more than 10 years. And over that period of time, it was quite obvious what was happening with our major source of foreign exchange, which is the energy sector. And the government should have been a lot more aggressive in terms of supporting the development of those sectors that have the capacity to bring foreign exchange into the country other than the energy sector.
Well, one of the things that one of your counterparts, Mariano Brown, said is the Prime Minister's concerns that some people might want to profit off of letting the exchange rate increase. However, whatever mechanism you use, he thinks that argument doesn't make sense because, according to him, he is of the opinion that people are not going to put their foreign exchange into the system because those who need to use foreign exchange would have concerns that we could put our Forex into the system, but then we will never be able to get it back out when we need it. So one of the things I want to ask you is, this issue that we have with supply, could it be that more and more private earners of foreign exchange are potentially seeing the whole situation that we're in and are telling themselves, listen, we ain't selling our forex to the bank for $6.75. That doesn't make sense because when we need it, it will be rationed back out to us. We're going to just keep it. And by making those decisions now, what's available to the banks are becoming less and less. And essentially, it's dare I ask if it's wholly going to be based on what the government provides as time goes on?
The thing is, no one in the current situation who have foreign exchange and need to convert it to TT will do so in the formal system. And I mean, this economy is not operating at the formal exchange rate of 6, 78, 79 TT dollars for $1 US. We are operating at the black market rate, 7.5 to $8 TT to $1 US. Even if businesses are able to access some amount of foreign exchange at the 6, 78, 79, they are costing their goods and services as if they are buying it at the black market rate. That is a reality. So, to some extent, Mariano is correct, but also to some extent, the Prime Minister is correct because there are people who are earning foreign exchange, have a need to convert it into TT in order to be able to transact whatever business that they have, and they will obviously enjoy a windfall if there is some form of devaluation. Because as it is, they are getting the black market rate. I mean, that this is happening all over. I mean, one of the media houses ran a story where they went to the Port of Spain and they walk into some stores and they could have purchased a couple of $1,000 US off the bat over the counter, no question asked, once they were willing to pay the black market rate. That is what is fueling and sustaining the supply of foreign exchange in this country, the black market. And that will continue to happen if we devalue and the supply is still not enough under a devalued situation to meet the demand. Then the black market rate is going to soar again, and it will obviously go above whatever that devaluation rate is. It happens all over the country. This is nothing new. It is not a new phenomenon. It exists all over the world. Ghana, right next to us, Venezuela, all of these countries, suffer the challenges when they did of a situation where foreign exchange was faced.
Well, one of the things that is now the debate is, I guess you could say, to put it in simple terms, changing the exchange rate, right? Now, we've heard the calls not for devaluation per se and for the market forces to be literally just unleashed on a foreign exchange rate, but for us to have a managed float of the forex rate. Now, the thing is, technically, the central bank is supposed to be operating under managed float. So I want to ask exactly what is it that, at least you could speak for yourself, that you want to see happen? Is it that potentially the managed float rate that we have, we're at the upper end of that rate and they're not necessarily looking to go any further, but do you think we need to go further? The range that the managed float is operated under maybe needs to be raised higher. What is it exactly, not necessarily in very specific details, but generally speaking, that you want to see with a managed float moving forward?
Sure. Well, that question has two parts. What he asked me, what my ideal world is, and then what the world is given the current constraint. My ideal world, obviously, we don't interfere with the value of the currency. But for that to happen, the economy needs to be growing. We need to be generating, more and more foreign exchange to shore up the supply. But that, and God's space, that apparently we're not going to see anytime soon. So it means that something has to give. And the Minister of Finance, the government central bank, something has to give in terms of prioritizing the allocation of our foreign exchange if it is that no decision is made with respect to changing the rate. You are correct. We have been operating within a very small bandwidth. And a lot of people don't understand, I think, and I think it's useful to explain it, what we mean by a managed float. A managed float is a situation where there is some amount of allowance for the free market forces to operate. But the free market forces will operate within constraints. And the constraint it will operate under is within a lower limit and an upper limit. So let's say, for example, we accept the fact that what is currently the upper limit, which is the 679 in the former system, we now make that the lower band because clearly the value is now going below that. So the market is telling you that there is no room for the currency, for our currency to strengthen, right? So we're not going to go to a situation where it's 5 TT dollars to $1 US. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But what we know is that the black market rate is going to about $8, and it doesn't seem really to be going above that. So maybe a suggestion is that the managed float now goes to a situation where the floor is the 678.79, and the ceiling becomes $8. So it means that the currency, the value of our currency, can fluctuate between these two values depending on supply and demand. Now, we already know that we are at that peak for the $8. So the $8 may not give us any room. It will just automatically go to that $8. Mm-hmm. And it will be right back where we are. And it will be more or less almost like a fixed situation where the formal exchange rate is going to be 8 to 1. So maybe if you want to give some room, you have to go higher up. Maybe you need to go to $9. The IMF is on record saying our currency is devalued by about 33%. So we can easily do the math in order to determine what that kind of value is. But again, there are other things for the government to do. The government can go the route which we did in the 1980s of putting imported items on negative lists. They could increase the import duties on what is being more luxury items, so it makes it more expensive, and therefore, hopefully, that acts as a signal to reduce the amount of foreign exchange being used for luxury items like, let's say, like high-end furniture or, very, very large screen television, because there is a certain amount of basic things that we need. So those are some of the measures that are available to the government. The government, the Prime Minister is now seeking to, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance is now seeking to do where he's meeting with his stakeholders in order to determine whether he needs to provide direction to the commercial banks in terms of what is some formulas they should use in order to allocate foreign exchange. That is something that he is looking at in a context of saying, I'm not interfering with the exchange rate. We are committed to keeping it where it is. So if you're committed to keeping it where it is, then you have to intervene. Ideally, we don't want intervention. Nobody wants the government, the central bank, or the Minister of Finance have to intervene in the way that the foreign exchange is allocated. But there is clear need for it in this moment because there are some people who seem to be having open access, and then there are some people who have absolutely no access. So it doesn't seem to be that the system of allocation is fair and equitable. So unless you are prepared to do things to increase the supply of foreign exchange in as quick a time as possible, you have no choice but to either move to a devalued rate of the currency, whether it is through a pure devaluation, whether it is through a managed float with a higher ceiling, some form of reducing the value of the PT dollar. Or if you don't want to do that, then you have to intervene. It's as simple as that. That is where we are at in Trinidad and Tobago. Our main source of foreign exchange, the energy sector, is not going to recover anytime soon. The government has given us a date of 2027. Even that is quite optimistic. We're already at the end of 2024. You don't snap finger and bring gas to market from another country to ours. More than that, we are now in a situation where there's a new government in the United States. We're not sure how things are going to play out with respect to how they will manage relationships with the Maduro government, what kind of measures or sanctions they may place on the government, and how that will impact us. All of these things we don't know. Mm-hmm. And because of these issues, we have no choice. We have had no choice for a long time. But if it wasn't important a few years ago, right now it is do or die. We have to focus on developing those sectors that can bring in foreign exchange. The tourism industry, you know, aspects of the tourism industry which are no-brainers is the yachting industry. You know, focus on health tourism, on cuisine tourism. There's so many, ecotourism. There's so many areas that we can focus on. Non-energy manufacturing, you know, based especially off of our agriculture sector, supporting the domestic agriculture so we could reduce our food import in a substantive and meaningful manner. These things need support from government. It needs policy direction. We need to know that the government is pointing the economy in that direction and provide any kind of incentive that will then incentivize the private sector to get on board.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, particularly with agriculture. That seems like two birds with one stone. We may even be able to have more specialty products that we could export. Meanwhile, food security would reduce the food import bill. But with regards to trade duties on luxury items, this is something I agree with. However, I don't know, but I'm not sure if you could answer this. So as best as you can, to what extent can we do so before maybe we start to get negative responses from our international trade partners? Because I don't know, with regards to various international treaties and the World Trade Organization, to what extent could we put duties on items or maybe increase VAT or taxes or what have you to discourage their importation before we see any pushback?
Now, obviously, the most formal answer to that would be we don't have a lot of room because we are signatories to the World Trade Organization, and with that comes all of the obligations with respect to free trade. Having said that, though, we're a dot. We're probably half of a dot in the world scale, with the exception of our energy sector, which we put on our side because that's declined. But in terms of how we impact international trade, you know, we're really, really very small with respect to anything other than energy. And I say that, therefore, to say that if we do tweak things in terms of our duties, etc., it will take a while for anybody to notice, anybody of consequence to notice, you know. And by the time that happens, if we are strategic in terms of simultaneously, you know, refocusing on diversification and foreign exchange earning, you know, by the time people notice that somebody wants to bring some case against us, we can say, well, okay, you know what, don't worry about it, and we can simply remove it. Right? So I'm saying that it is all about being strategic. There is also the use of non-tariff barriers that we can use in order to be able to protect our domestic production. For example, you know, it is illegal to import honey. I know the minister was talking about legalizing it recently. I'm not sure if it was actually done. But even so I'm assuming it hasn't been done. But even during the time not so long ago when for sure I know it was illegal to import honey, there was imported honey on the shelves of major establishments in Trinidad and Tobago. Right? And that was illegal, but the honey was coming in. But the reason why honey should not be imported in Trinidad and Tobago is because most of the honey that we import will be honey that has been, where the bees that would have produced the honey would have been injected with antibodies. And the argument is when the antibodies from the honey that we bring in, wear out, and let's say our bees find themselves with access to the imported honeys, and they go and they feed on it, our honey, the bee stock could actually be infected and be wiped out. As it currently exists, our bee stock is very resilient to disease, and therefore that is a reason to protect that industry. Mm-hmm. So, and it's not through tarification; it's simply because you have a situation where you are protecting an industry against
foreign encroachment
viruses. Correct. In the same way, I'm talking about disease. In the same way that you can't take in meat products into the United States, into Canada, for example, even if it's cooked.
Yeah.
So you cannot take in even KFC, even your cooked duck and whatever. It's illegal. You could be charged to take even cooked meat into Canada. It's simply banned, and you simply are subjected to a fine. So it has nothing to do with duties. It has to do with the fact that they are protecting their livestock industry, and this is how they're protecting it. And I am saying that we can do the same thing in Trinidad and Tobago. We could take the poultry industry, for example. We are importing poultry that could be 5, 10 years old. That is what we are importing. It's not the same thing as the fresh poultry that we're producing. So we have a basis to say these are different products. And therefore, because it's different products, I could substantially increase the duties, for example, on imported chicken. Although people in Trinidad are going to be up in arms because that imported garbage chicken that we are consuming is much cheaper than the local fresh chicken.
Mm-hmm.
So there are repercussions of everything, but at the end of the day, we have to balance things, and we have to make informed and sensible decisions.
Because one of the things I don't understand is, I would have thought we need food security. Local food production should increase, particularly with honey. Why does it seem like the private sector looks at, oh, well, we could import honey because honey has high prices here, as opposed to the high prices here, so we could try to manufacture or increase the manufacture of honey to capture that opportunity. That is a whole other question. But there's one last thing that I do want to ask you before you have to go. With regards to our foreign debt, apparently our foreign exchange reserves, now the minister keeps harping on the fact that, oh, we have so many months of import cover. The problem is our reserves also equate our foreign debt. So I don't know if one set of reserves could cover both debt and import cover at the same time effectively without some sort of risk that we may get bad experiences down the line. But one of the things that Karen Nishishera pointed out yesterday was the fact that we're incurring foreign debt for recurring expenditure, not for capital expenditure. And one could argue, if we want to diversify well, especially to get goods for the export market, we might need a lot of capital expenditure to import machinery and the like to get these industries either started or growing. Would you say that that is one of the key indicators moving forward, that we need to stop borrowing money from abroad just to pay our bills, just to pay salaries, but we should potentially borrow money from abroad to import machinery, for capital expenditure, to further move forward with diversification one way or the other, like make a facility where we get the loans and then the forex from the loans could then be distributed throughout various channels in order to encourage more manufacturing, more of the non-energy manufacturing sector.
But you've kind of answered the question. So you are correct. If we're borrowing, we should be borrowing not for recurrent expenditure. We should be borrowing in order to invest and therefore have the capacity to repay the loan that we take, etc. But when we're borrowing for recurrent expenditure, we're doing nothing on the other side in terms of expanding our income capacity to repay the loan. So yeah, that one is a no-brainer, but that's what we're doing. But it's more than that, though. Actually, the implication, the issue of devaluing the currency, whichever way you take it, right? I'm using the word loosely, just reducing the value, means that the amount of TT dollars that is required in order to service the foreign debt is going to obviously increase, which means government now has less TT dollars available to it in order to expend. All right? So if currently it requires about 30% of our national budget to effectively service the government's debt on the whole. If we are to devalue the currency, it would mean that percentage would go up. Not just 30%, it would probably go up to about 40-something, 50%, right? Which means there's less money available to the government to spend here. So that is a major concern. On the issue of allocating or borrowing money, borrowing in US dollars in order to shore up manufacturing, etc., the government does in fact have a line of USD that is available through the Exim Bank for export expansion. Now, I don't know, it's been running for quite some years now. I've never heard any analysis done of it in order to be able to determine whether that foreign exchange has been allocated for this purpose, whether it has in fact resulted in increased foreign exchange earning capacity. And I think that is something that we need to do in order to be able to assess whether that is having the effect, that the desired effect. So that I think is the urgency. I've been calling for this, and I have not really heard anybody respond to that in the formal space. But the issue of borrowing on the whole should be for capital purpose, for increasing the productive capacity of our country. But however, we in Trinidad and Tobago, we've been running deficit budgets for well over 10 years. We only had 1 year in that last 10-year period where we didn't. We were running deficit budget long before that as well. So let me not be unfair, right? We have been running when you run a deficit budget, it means obviously that you're spending more than you're earning. If you're spending more than you're earning, you have to fill the gap somehow. The ways in which the government fills the gap is 1, by borrowing, or 2, by the sale of assets, or 3, by drawing down on the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, which they have been doing as well. And, draw down on the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, while it does have that element that allows for stabilization, so that if the price of oil and gas falls, the government has the right to draw down on the Heritage and Stabilization Fund in order to be able to make up a shortfall, which is what it has been doing. There's also the heritage aspect of it, which is where monies should be kept to ensure that future generations benefit from this, oil and gas resource that we have had. But we have a situation where there is no obligation that a certain percentage must be kept for heritage. All we know is that the fund as a whole cannot go below $1 billion, I think it is. So that the government has a lot of room in there to use up that money and to use it in the name of stabilization, therefore use it on recurrent expenditure, and just use out our savings. It has the capacity to sell whatever asset it has, and over the last few years we have been seeing that happening. It has been selling off shares in Republic Bank, in First Citizen. We have seen that kind of thing happening. When you get to the point where you no longer have any assets to sell, what happens then if you are not expanding your income generating capacity?
Well, a follow-up would be, outside of continual drawing cash from the HSF, basically, do you think now is the time we should be seeing aggressive moves to try to fix our issues in the economy? Some of those moves potentially might be unpopular, might cause some short-term pain with regards to the population, in order to try to get us back on track in the long term. Do you think we've reached that point where we could no longer manage things with a facsimile of how we've been going throughout the last 10 to 20 years, that we might need to make some hard decisions and make them quickly if we don't want to deal with worse consequences 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, if you ask me that question as an economist, I would say, yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. But, if you ask me to switch and put on a political hat, then we have a situation where we're in an election year. And therefore, an election and politics trumps everything in this country. And therefore, the politics will trump, the kind of decision. Although one can argue, and this government gets the credit, but they have made some pretty hard decisions over this term, in terms of removing almost to zero the fuel subsidy, the changes that were made to gate. We are noticed for increased electricity rates, increased water rates, introduction of property taxes, so that, the government has, in fact, implemented some pretty hard measures on the citizenry in a context where wages and salaries are not going up, where job creation is not happening, and people are being squeezed really badly. But I want to, if we're ending now, I want to come back to the fact that Trinidad and Tobago, this economy should not be where we are today. If we didn't need a gypsy or a fortune teller to tell us that oil and gas was going to run out. We always knew it would happen. It's a non-renewable energy. It's a non-renewable resource. That's one. Two, climate change has been a real thing for a very long time. And any smart economy, look at China, for example, in terms of the advancement it is making with respect to the production of electric cars, with respect to setting targets and moving its own demand away from fossil fuel to alternative energy sources. These things didn't just happen overnight. These things have been happening for quite a while. And government has failed their country in terms of recognizing these things in a meaningful way and plotting them into their planning and their development agenda, and ensuring that today didn't happen, but it didn't do that, and therefore what we're facing now is happening. It is real. But We can't throw our hands up in the air. We can't just give up. So we have to take stock. We have to move forward. I think there's a lot of very easy fixes around us to shore up our foreign exchange supply. Those easy fixes don't need a harder fix, which is the crime situation. And that, if we don't fix that in short time, I don't think that there is any hope for the growth of most other sectors, because it really is destabilizing influence on everything. It increases the cost of doing business. It reduces the number of hours people do business. It increases the number of businesses that are closing down. It increases migration and brain drain. All of these things are the negative impacts of crime. And we have to do something about it if we want to give the economy space and the room in order to breathe and grow again.
Well, Dr. Sajuan, I want to thank you for joining me to have this discussion. I mean, based on what you've said, it's a lot more complex than maybe what a lot of people might think it is, but your closing words there, we have to still be willing to face it because we don't really have a choice. We can't ignore it.
Correct.
With that said, I just want to say a day in advance, but congratulations to your family. And I hope that you'll have a good time tomorrow, and best of luck to your daughter in her future endeavors.
Thank you so much. Yes, looking forward to it. Be a proud mommy standing up as she gets called to the bar. So, yes, good moment in my life and in hers.
All right.
Thank you.
Best of luck to her, as well as thanks for coming, of course, to take your time this morning. Hope to hear great things. But, folks, we'll take a break. When we come back, we will open up the phone lines. Of course, you could have your say on all the topics that we spoke about today, or topics that we didn't necessarily speak about today, where you could call in and maybe disagree with me. You know what? If there's too much variable diarrhea, come and give me some medicine if you think you know what the appropriate medicine is. Now, we'll be right back after this.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here talking about WSN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Small, I just had a discussion, a continuation of our commentary on the Forex situation, where at the end of the day, it might seem obvious, except it's something I think too often is lost in the conversation, and that is the fact that in the past we used to say eventually it will run out. No one had the political will to really put things in place for when that happened, and now it is here. And on one hand, one could put some of the blame on the current administration. On the other hand, it is not entirely fair to put all of the blame on the administration. We could debate how you want to split the difference, but the reality is, at the end of the day, as Dr. Sajuan just said on air, we cannot run away from this one way or the other. With that said, we open up the phone lines. Please mute your television when you're talking to us. Unless, of course, you can't hear us, in which case then, that might be the only way for you to... Let's not go there, what happened earlier in the week. Generally speaking, don't try to listen to the phone and the TV at the same time. There's a delay, so it will be confusing. So when you get on air, listen to the phone, assuming you could hear me. With that said, we have Digger Martin on the line already. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Small. And let me apologize in the event that we get disrupted, TSTT and the collapsing product. Okay. I just heard this morning an up description of the Minister of Finance budget statement and the economy. And a former Minister of Energy, his description is tantamount to Bobby McFerrin's song, "Don't Worry, Be Happy." That is what he's saying about the current government handling of the economy, etc., etc. But what I want to talk on, my pet subject is the police service and your early utterances of how it has collapsed and it continues to disintegrate because the people we have in the leadership of the police service, you had 7 and you have 5. That is quite a lot. We have a new senior counsel, who is a junior minister of national security, who is responsible for the police service. You have a person who is now the DCP, who was in charge of those 2 prosecutions. If that person was a good manager, don't you think that person would have been monitoring these basically prosecution? Because we have in Trinidad and Tobago extortion, imitation police, bad police. Every day you hear something untowards about the police service. It's probably coincident or it's karma. We have a new police service commission. Let's see what they will do with respect to promotion in the police service. And 2 promotion I want to happen. First of all, Erla Christopher, a promotion for her, and DCP Martin, a promotion for those 2 women, because I believe they're incompetent, and we can't hide the fact. We have to say this country. Promote them to constable, because they have surpassed the level of competency a long time ago. They came out of the day of policing. They were mum during the JSC investigation, and people, I've been beating this all over the place. Go and read what they had to say. You know what they had to say? They had to say nothing. They were mum. They didn't want to sell out the errant police officer who were responsible for that. And look, you have another one. I was listening to another program, another one who is now head of the extortion thing. They make him an ACP. He has question to answer. A judge say he is a khaki officer and he must be investigated. We're not hearing where those investigations going when the judge highlight errant police officers. They are being promoted. They are being promoted and they are being faithful to Peter's principle into a higher level of incompetency. That is what the police service are going. Have a nice day.
We have, before I respond, we have Sanford on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on here. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, morning, sir. Mr. Small?
Morning.
Small?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I have 2 little small points to make. One, what are you talking about why we should develop and all that? You have $18 where in line like about two or 1 America.
Caller, you're breaking up for me. Caller from San Fernando, you're breaking up too much. It sounds like if we're getting latency issues with your phone call, so I'm not entirely sure. I don't know, are you using some sort of internet phone or internet program to dial? Because our phone line, as far as I understand, should just be a normal phone line. So I don't know why it sounds as though there's latency issues. I don't know if it's a technical issue on our end, but it shouldn't be. We just had Digger Martin, and Digger Martin had nothing of the sort. So Maybe you could try calling in on the other phone line just in case. And we could try again. If it is on your end, well, then we could try. We could fight up a little bit to see how it goes. But please try and call in. I don't necessarily want to lose your contribution with regards to what you have to say. Now, with what Mr. Digger Martin said, I'll say this. The situation, it's easy to look at DCP Martin and want to put the blame on her, but it's not so straightforward because one would think that when she was the head of the Professional Standards Bureau, I believe, I don't think she currently is as Deputy Commissioner of Police, so one would think that she would have been promoted. Therefore, there should be a new head of the Professional Standards Bureau, unless I am misinterpreting the situation. And if that's the case, technically speaking, it falls on that person first and foremost. Then it goes up the chain. Then it does go up the chain because at some point the box stops here, but depending on who to put the blame on, it could go all the way to the commissioner, potentially. As the Minister of Finance did just yesterday. We have San Fernando back. Caller, good morning. Hopefully we could...
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, now, I already made the first point about that so-called evaluation they're talking about and why they don't want to reappreciate our money. Now, I know it hinders a lot of things where the foreign exchange, earnings, and so on and so on. I'm not an economist, so I can't go there. I want to ask you a question now. Do you think our Prime Minister in that security meeting in Guyana will ask Mr. Modi to send some Gurkhas, you know, the Gurkhas from India, to deal with the crime like how Canada did it? Because clearly, they have police from the area, just like you and me, ordinary people, who they know what's going on, they're part of it, but we can't get that solved. Hello?
Yeah.
So I was wondering if he will ask for that assistance, right? And secondly, to prove my point now, many moons ago, when Dr. Williams was here, he told the garbage collectors, listen, if you don't want to do the job, I will import people and bring them to do the job. So why we can't do the same thing and solve the problem? Instead of just blaming everybody, just like you go blame me too, you know. Yeah, you go blame me too, you say, all is the cause. All right, so you have a nice day.
Thank you, caller. So the thing about the Gurkhas is they are a military unit. Now, technically, they are Nepalese. They are Gurkhas serving in the British Army, the Indian Army, the reserve unit in Brunei, and there's a contingent in Singapore, as well as I believe they're used for peacekeeping forces around the world. They are military units. If we want to have a literal war on crime, we could have that, but something tells me that might go beyond the pale for what most people would want in a law enforcement situation, which is more complicated than a combat situation. I understand, though, in principle, I agree with the fact that we need foreign aid, but I think some of the foreign aid that we need, training, maybe personnel, but training as well as assets for maritime patrol, because our borders are a mess, and we may have to come to the fact that it has gone beyond our ability to manage, which is one of the reasons why we need foreign help. We have Maraval on the line and then Shogunas. Maraval, good morning, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I'm calling to talk about these police that get free. 7 Monday and yesterday 5. How could we, when you see all these things happening in the police service, and they have police uniform with police holding up, and people getting robbed in their home with police, apparently police uniform. When you see things like this, how could you trust the police if police come in front of your door? If it could be real police or somebody in police clothes, and these kind of things happen, how could you trust the police people and say, okay, don't think with the police, just have some confidence in the police. You can have confidence in the police when you see all these things going on. For 7 Monday or when? Yesterday was 5, right? So if you see a police car and say there's police and they crash their badge, you're not getting the number, you're not getting anything. You can't expect people like that to come in your house. If you do something now, like the other day I saw the man who killed the police officer when he was in plain clothes. These things will happen because people not going to trust the police anymore, because if the police get in corruption, it's in corruption, and you get free, you go. No prosecutor come to prosecute you. No, nobody just come to help the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. That all these police getting in this kind of trouble, and they're getting off scot-free. I don't understand it. Where the police force, where they went, what happened to them? It happened a long time, but it's brazen now that every police that get on charge getting away. I find, I don't know, it's scary right now for people in Trinidad and Tobago. If police stop you, somebody like police stop you, and you're afraid now and you try to, get away, they will shoot you or something like that. That's what I'm afraid of, because I have two sons on the road, and they're always on the way they're going to work, they're coming back, and you see somebody like police stop you. Because yesterday my son went to get a car, and he said, "Mommy, when we look at the thing, it's people scamming you." He went to buy a car, but he went to look at the car first, then to send him to the bank to get the car. And he said, "Mommy, when we look up on the thing, it was a scam."
Yeah.
So I am worried about these things. If you try to stop a police, now, and the police is taking up because they have air conditioning and they have this thing, all this kind of thing. It's scary now. I am so fed up and so frustrated at what's going on.
Caller,
you asked the commissioner and she's not doing anything.
Caller, I'll have to ask you to end there because we have another
Yes,
caller waiting.
thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. I'll respond to that but after this caller, Shagona's on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Yes, Sean.
Yes, morning.
Well, yesterday is live, and I listened to the repeat. I hear such.
Caller, I don't know what is it. I don't know if it's this phone line, but we're not just getting breaks, but it seems like there's latency issues on the phone lines. I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to have to ask Shagonas if you could call in on the other line because something is going wrong. We have San Fernando on the other line, though. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Thanks for having Dr. Sajo on the program. I think I just find it wasn't enough. I would have liked her to go into a little more on the demand side and a little more creativity in dealing with the demand. But the fact that the Minister of Finance is meeting with the stakeholders, the banks, and it seems to be that is what his intention is, how to trying to get solutions to deal with the demand side. Going to this issue with these police officers who cases collapsed because of the seems to failure of the prosecution to appear in the court in the way they should. When these cases, after the PSB charged these officers would have, this case would have been, the DPP would have or should have appointed a prosecutor to prosecute these cases. I am hoping that that was the case and that there was not a police prosecutor involved in this. So we need to get to the bottom of to find out which side of it, was it the DPP or was it the police prosecutors that handled this. However, even though the cases collapsed, there can still be disciplinary action taken by the police, by the commissioner of police, and I hope that is going to happen. Now, as with respect to Suzette Martin, one of the biggest disappointments of Judith Jones's Police Service Commission is the appointment of Suzette Martin, in my opinion. There were two serious demerits against Suzette Martin, which should have negated her from being appointed to the DCP. One was that issue with the Brent Thomas issue, and two, that issue where she actually has an active case in the court for that accident on the but she was charged. She's not under investigation. She was charged, and I had, since the appointment of that Police Service Commission with Judith Jones. When I looked at her on the first time they appeared in front of the Joint Select, I had no confidence in that commission. None. Because when you looked at it, Madam Justice Jones had decided that she was going to answer the questions posed to the commission, even though they were individuals there that questions were posed to. She decided she would answer every question, and that was not the hallmark of a good leader.
Mm.
I was totally surprised and disappointed when I saw that. As I said, Sean, have a good day. That issue with Dr. Sarjan, we're going to continue in that vein. However, we can run the country with 50 billion or whatever it is without taking loans. Just that it's going to have some pain.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
I will say this, based on her opening statement, the implication, which I think in a vacuum I agree with, yes, food security will help the import bill, and I think that might be one area where it's a long-term solution, right? For certain commodities, I don't know if we'll ever be able to produce them ourselves. I do wonder why we don't maybe have an electronic manufacturing plant or factory for a good or a line of goods, but again, that's not an entire consumer catalog of what our population demands. It's not going to fill all of our needs. But I will say this, I'll answer the Suzette Martin and the police situation after, because we have another call. But I will say this up front. Based on what Dr. Sarjan said, trying to deal with it from the demand side is not a long-term solution, right? And I think the reason why, at least one of the things that I could come up with, is economies by their very nature want to grow and need to grow unless they're in an unhealthy situation. An economy that shrinks is not a good thing because populations grow, right? And because populations grow, economies just naturally have to grow unless we want to see a decline. And when you see populations and economies shrink, that is arguably a nation in decline. Yet to see in the modern world if such a trend could be reversed, because historically, trends like that tend not to be reversed, but the current circumstances are not quite what they were way back when. We have another call on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on air.
Yes, Sean. What I was trying to say, when I was in the public service, all these officers had diaries. And when you had any appointments or whatever you had to do, those will be recorded in the diary. I cannot see how these police officers could not attend court without consequences. And my idea is, if you did that, you'd have to give a good reason. And if you couldn't, disciplinary actions will be taken. That's it. Does you have any question?
No. I fully understand where you're coming from, because I believe what you said there is 100% the case. Back at the beginning, such things were not happening, but they're happening now, unfortunately.
They happen. No, they to happen, but action would have taken.
Well, exactly. They weren't necessarily going to get away with it for free. But now, the implication is...
Why? And that could be only with the politicians.
Yes.
Them is the one who have oversight.
Yes. Thank you, Professor. One of the things that I found, that I found a little bit shocking, but I should not have been surprised. Of course, as you know, Donald Trump, he is now the president, and he has put Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk basically in charge of cleaning up government efficiency, cleaning up government wastage. And one of the things that Vivek Ramaswamy said was that in Washington, the amount of public servants they have, it's bloated. Sound familiar? That you could argue that that's going on in Trinidad right now. And he said one of the things why we could move some of these departments outside of Washington and downsize them, if not outright get rid of them, is that in many cases in Washington, there are people who have government jobs that do not show up to work. Sound familiar? Now, on one hand, I was shocked that it was happening in the United States, in their capital, right? But on the other hand, I'm like, why am I surprised? It happens here. We are not some special case of laziness or incompetence or malicious people. We are humans. They are humans. What we see here probably is happening around the world. And that's one of the things where we should not think, oh, this thing can't happen. Yes, it can, because it's happening elsewhere too. We're all human beings, and human nature and human psychology, there's a certain amount of similarity across the board despite culture. And globalization also means that culturally we are becoming more and more uniform. Not completely, but we're being influenced by foreign culture, and they're being influenced by us. So our mindsets are starting to become a little bit more similar. Just enough to say, why are we surprised? It happens elsewhere, it could happen here. This is the ridiculousness that is going on here. Right now, it seems as though the American people had enough. Is Trump the solution? I don't know. I don't know if he's, I don't think or I expect him to be the perfect solution. What I expect is that he's going to think to do things to try to solve the problem. They might work, they might not work. The point is, at some point, at the very least, there is an attempt, an outward attempt, an overt attempt, not just lip service at an attempt, which is generally what politics has been within the Western world for maybe the last 50 years. That's just, you know, me throwing out a number. Don't hold me with that. But with that said, this situation, the professor always points out that a lot of things that we believe and observe to be true in our public service are not supposed to be happening, and yet somehow I think too many of us accept it. We accept it, and in fact we even know people who take advantage of it, therefore we turn a blind eye to it, and it's sickening. Now with that said, go back to Suzette Martin. All I'll say is this. All I will say was this: I don't know how guilty she is and what she might be guilty of or what she might not be guilty of. All I know is that there are red flags. Just like how, from my perspective, Erla gave off red flags to me at her first Joint Select Committee, which was months into her first year. And I saw those red flags, and I knew that this was not a good thing. And I knew that I would have been extremely surprised if she turned out to be a great commissioner. And I don't think anybody would say she turned out to be a great commissioner. And I think with regards to Suzette Martin, we're seeing a similar situation where this is some of the consequences that could happen if you ignore red flags for no good reason. Not that red flags are the be-all and end-all, right? A red flag is not cause enough to condemn somebody, but then you have to do the due diligence and resolve those concerns before you give someone higher authority and higher responsibility. And it's not just, listen, and one of the things I want to say is, because the caller, ironically, he advanced the case of women yesterday, and now it seems like he's picking on the 2 female executive members of the police service. But I think those who follow police public messaging, police decisions, police appearances at the Joint Select Committee will not limit it to just Airlink, Christopher, and Suzette Martin. But they will also include some of the other DCPs and maybe ACPs where you look at their performance, their decisions, and what they say publicly, and you have questions and concerns with regards to their decision making, with regards to the results that we see. And dare I say this, because for quite some time we had people call in after Gary Griffith was unceremoniously booted from the job, despite the fact that I think weeks before they were putting legislation in place to allow him to act as commissioner so that they could then renew his contract and have his time in the office unbroken. All of a sudden, there was an issue. There was an issue, right? And we've spoken about length of what the potential reasons for the issues could be. It's not just the FUL investigation by Stanley John, which, based on the utterances of the outgoing head of the Police Service Commission, who was not the person to form that investigation, based on what she said about the Service Commission, that investigation, we have to question now the validity of it from the jump, because she said she had no authority to do any investigation. So how is it that her predecessor was able to do so? Maybe that's why we ain't see diddly about it in the public sphere. Oh, it's in the courts. I wonder how long it'll take to actually go anywhere. Maybe long after the current regime has retired, then we might get a resolution to that case. Although the way how the government is going, it might be thrown out for who knows how many reasons. Just ask the Auditor General how frivolous cases can be taken all the way to the Privy Council. Now, with that said, a lot of people might want to say, what did Gary Griffith do as commissioner? All I will say was this. The one thing that I am confident of saying that he did was putting a good effort to call out the police service publicly, to have public examples for the police service of what should be done, and to improve the public perception in so doing of the police service so people had more confidence, not just in Gary, but in the police itself. Because he made it a point of emphasis in public communications, and it was something that the rank and file would have probably had a harder time to ignore. Things like this, if he was here, he would probably be all over it in a press conference. And he would probably do something about it. Now, does that make him a more effective commissioner with dealing with the murder rate? Unwilling, rather seems to feel the need to bow to the political demands, whether it's the internal politics of the service, because she wants to be commissioner, or the external demands of the Cabinet, the National Security Council, and Parliament. That is to say, the majority. We see very little in terms of independent and initiative. Very little. Think about it. The most of what we got from the Commissioner of Police in recent months is, I am sorry for the loss of life, and we will redouble our redoubled efforts that we already redoubled when we redoubled them last time, and the time before that we redoubled them, and the time before that, and we will leave no stone unturned, except we have left no stone unturned so many times that the stones are perfectly round now, given the amount of times that we've turned them over. What are you going to do about it? This is not the PNM's country, or the UNC's country, or the NTA, or the COP, or the PEP, or HOPE, or the PSA, or the OWTU, the TPP, and the PDP in Tobago. This is not Tutor's country. This is not any private conglomerate's country. This is your country. What are you going to do about it? We have an election in less than a year. And that's not necessarily the be-all and end-all. But at the very least, if we're going to be so lazy as to allow other people run our country into the ground, at the very least, what we can do is try to do something, even though I would argue it's the bare minimum, come the next election. I'm getting frustrated because I'm seeing a lot of complaining and not a lot of doing. If you want to complain about people and then ask those same people to fix all your problems for you, I would say that you have an issue with regards to your thought processes. It's not just them to blame. We like it, so we put them there. We want our carnival, we want our excess, we want our freeness, we want our parties. We want the EMA and the police to ignore noise pollution. We want underage drinking and public intoxication to be ignored. We want PH taxis that are unregistered, but not necessarily the most secure for a young woman to go home at night. We like it so. Folks, this is Talking About the WESN show. Michael Small here reminding you, if you want tomorrow to be a good day, because I'm not going to say it about today right now, we have to make it so. Stop demanding other people to do it for us, but then you doubt their capability in the first place. Isn't that one way to insanity? And be that said, remember your allegiance to the Republic, not to your organization, whatever it may be. This is a nation first. And your private considerations come second. We all should prosper, and if we all prosper, we will all do well. If we want to have a zero-sum game, we will all eventually suffer for it. Just wait and see. That's what's going on in America, Canada, United Kingdom, Europe right now. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And remember, it's nice to be nice, but maybe I need to start saying some not nice things. Maybe I'm getting too desperate. I hope to see everybody tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. I mean, and Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada in spite of the obvious difference in size.